Okay, we're live on the YouTube scene. Okay, hello everybody. UFC 320 post-fight card review. Now, honestly, I don't usually do these, and I was feeling only this weekend how lackluster the last few MMA cards had felt to me. I really felt like I was losing my buzz, my spark, and there was a little glimmer yesterday when I started to get that back. And that was Mr. Pettis getting a ridiculous spinning elbow where I actually verbalized a reaction for the first time in what seemed like forever. So this fight card at UFC 320 was tremendously needed because the outcome for a lot of those fights, I think, wouldn't blow you away if you woke up and didn't watch the fights on the Saturday night and saw the results on the Sunday morning. But the fights themselves were must watch. And we had a few standouts. We're going to get into UFC320. We most certainly are going to be speaking about Alex Pereira's emphatic victory and a potential move to heavyweight. What is next for Jiri Prochazka? Because that was the most Jiri Prochazka win I've ever seen. And it's getting to a point now, every time I watch him fight, I feel like the closer he gets to losing is the closer he's actually getting to fighting and to winning. I was actually thinking at one point, he's not getting beaten enough. Because you look at all of his fights, the moment that he starts winning is the moment he actually starts having his worst moment. And I said to myself earlier, I can't really think of a fighter where that's, at least for my window of fandom, as true or as poignant. And I think of Tony Ferguson. And then I think Jiri Prochazka is the 205 Tony Ferguson. That is the perfect way to describe him. Very similar styles, very similar resiliency, and similar ability to just weather the storm and then just be present in the eye of the storm, in the chaos. And he said that in his post-fight press conference. So that was just super impressive. So I think we're going to need to start from the top of the tree on this one. I'm going to have a little sip of iced coffee before, just to get me going. It's been a long night. I'll be real. 11 p.m. the fight card started in the UK, and it's only just about wrapped up about 6 a.m. So it was an intense one. I had a monster, I had some steak, but I'm ready to get into this properly. I want to start at the top. I want to start with Alex Pereira on Goliath. This, by the way, is a phenomenal iced coffee. I need to point that. I've got the amount of honey to coffee ratio absolutely spot on the last couple. We're getting into Alex now. Okay. Let's talk about the actual fight first. And then let's talk about what I think should be next for our boy Alex Pereira. And I'm going to try and not get too heated on this one because I have said for a long time, I said on a live stream before the fight happened, the best thing that could happen to the UFC, Alex Pereira, and Tom Aspinall is if Alex goes out here, sparks Magomed, says, I told you so, it was a blip, I was overworked, I had an injury, it was too much, too soon, in too short a window of fighting days. Don't forget, he was just turning them around. I've gone and done that. He can't make the weight anymore. Moves to heavyweight. Tom goes out there and dispatches Garn, and boom, you have the biggest fight, arguably in the UFC right now. Tom Aspinall and Alex Pereira at heavyweight. Now, do I think it's a tremendously favorable matchup for Alex? No, I don't. I think more times than not out of 10, he gets a blast double where Tom's head is on his chest. He runs him across the octagon, pushes him against the cage, takes him down and submits him. I think more times than not out of 10. However, is there any areas of Tom Aspinall's game I believe Alex Pereira can exploit? Most certainly. And that is from someone who believes Tom is a generational talent. But no one is perfect. No one is perfect. So you have to look at small windows of opportunity. And yes, they are small, but who better to exploit a small window of opportunity than Alex Pereira? And we were just reminded of that again, because a lot of people say it only takes one shot at heavyweight. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying it's a lazy narrative. Because when you think, for the most part, about most heavyweights, they're not that in shape and they don't really have elite striking. So get past 3-4 minutes, they're kind of winging at shots a little bit tired and a little bit gassed out, and the technique's gone a bit out the window. And it's actually quite hard to find a clean shot on someone, especially when they're sweaty and moving and the target's constantly changing. But Tom Aspinall can do that most certainly. Alex Pereira can do that. And Tom does float his chin. That's the only thing you can say about him. It's the only thing. In an almost perfect fight record in the UFC, it's the one small chink in his armor. And if anyone's going to exploit that, is Alex Pereira. Most certainly. It just so happens to be his best weapon. And Alex is smart enough to know that the first shot may not get him, but he has to put 2 and 3 together to then get him at the end of his combinations. And we saw Daniel Santos do that earlier in the card, made a really nice adjustment. So I think that's the biggest fight to make. I think it's the only fight to make. I don't think Alex Pereira can actually make 205 anymore. I don't think enough people are having that conversation. I don't think we truly appreciate quite how hard it is for him to actually make light heavyweight, which is insane to think he fought at 185 pounds, captured gold, fought arguably one of the greatest middleweight, not arguably, one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Yes, he lost to him, but he also had a spectacular 900 matches with him across kickboxing and MMA. Fought the very, very best. Done it all in a ridiculous time frame. And you look at generational talents, and it's so bizarre. You can look at a fighter who seemingly has no credentials on the ground and is just the most elite kickboxer, comes into an organization and actually says, you don't need to know how to grapple for the most part. Yeah, sure, I can stuff a few takedowns, I'll get back to my feet. He actually does a really good job in staying safe. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. But what I mean is, offers nothing for the most part in regards to grappling. Actually says, I'm not going to grapple at all. I'm just going to strike, and I'm going to do it better than you. And that is something you can only do when you are the very, very highest level. And that is exactly what Alex Pereira is. So if he doesn't go to heavyweight, what's next? The only fight that makes sense, in my opinion, Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg. As much as I love Jiri, and we'll come on to his fight in a second, as much as I love Jiri, we have seen it twice already. And there are certain circumstances where there's fights and narratives strong enough to defeat that bland arc. Max Holloway, Volkanovski. But Max had cleared out the division. That isn't necessarily the case. I know Yuri's had a great win against Jamel Hill, and he had a great win against Khalil Roundtree. But Carlos Ulberg is on, what, the longest active win streak since John Jones? A bit of fresh blood. And I think we can always appreciate that fresh blood is always important for these divisions, especially somewhere like light heavyweight, where we've had decades of the same guy at the top. I think it's finally just got moving. Even though it's changed hands a little bit recently, Uncle Ive obviously didn't hold the belt very long. But I think that's kind of fun. I think kind of keep the ball rolling. If Alex wants to fight, they're cool, but give him new blood. I personally, I'm not saying I wouldn't watch that Jiri trilogy. Of course I would. I don't love the storyline as much coming into that one than I do a Carlos Ulberg, who is only one going to sit there and trade kickboxing technique for technique. Teammate of Israel Adesanya, seemingly not friends with him anymore. There's a whole narrative behind the scenes there. Who knows? Maybe we have the craziest storyline ever where Alex Pereira goes and trades with Israel. I can't see that ever happening, but just hearing some Twitter whispers of them not getting on, I'm just romanticizing a storyline as dramatic as possible. Carlos Ulberg, in my opinion, is the next fight. Don't really see anyone else in that picture, which leads us on to, naturally, a next fight that we need to talk about. Well, of course, we'll come back to Merab, we'll circle back, but when we're on the topic of Alex Pereira, I mean, we have to mention Jiri Brashka's performance. We have to. Now, there were a lot of things that I thought Khalil Roundtree did well in that fight. I think he did look tremendously balanced. I think he looked well calculated, maybe a little bit too much. I'll explain what I mean by that. And I think he showed nice techniques. He showed some nice punches and some nice kicks. But I will be perfectly honest, I expected more from him. Even though he got Jiri very uncomfortable, he seemingly got him injured. I'm not sure if that was something lingering before or if he did that in the fight. But he was uncomfortable. He seemed hurt. He seemed like the damage was accumulating. And it was going into the third, like it always is. And Jiri needs a finish. But that's when he's most dangerous. And in my opinion, I would have liked to have seen a couple more things from Khalil Roundtree. Firstly, I didn't see nearly enough of that back leg kick. Not nearly enough. And if you actually go back to see where Jiri first started having success, it was his back leg teep. It was his stabbing teep. It was actually phenomenal. I'm going to go back and watch it a couple of times because it was a really interesting angle. It was very similar to what Nathaniel Wood does, where they arch the leg and it comes across into the liver. But instead of coming across into the liver, he was actually coming across into the midsection on the other side, into the floating rib. And I actually think that was really the beginning and the end for Khalil. He landed a couple of those, and I just saw the hands drop a little bit, and I know he felt them, and they were dug in with the point of the toe. And you get one of those 10 minutes in when you're not really braced for it, and that can change a lot very fast. I would have liked to have seen that from Khalil. That rear teep, it's the perfect technique in that open stance battle. What was interesting is Jiri actually came out southpaw, and I thought, this is interesting because now this takes away a lot of shots from Khalil Roundtree's game that he gets against an unorthodox fighter, which is that power body kick, which is that power kick to the leg as well on that lead side. But he didn't use it enough, in my opinion. I think he could have really capitalized on that. I think he could have beat the legs up more. I think I would have liked to have seen more output. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but when you've got Jiri on the back foot, you have to just be smart aggressive. And part of that smart aggressive is sometimes being more aggressive and just giving more output and not necessarily just walking into the clinch and throwing recklessly, but you can't be throwing in ones and 1-2 here and there. It's just not enough against Jiri because he will eat that. You think of it as waves of attack. He just has enough durability to sustain these multiple waves of attack. So you can't just throw one at him. That's not enough ammo. You can't just throw one or two. You have to kind of throw 3 and 4. And Khalil Roundtree was getting off. And once he needed to just add a little bit more to those combinations. I would have liked to have seen more elbows as Jiri started to advance and he was starting to get hurt. I think there were some opportunities for some crash elbows there. If you go back to the Corey Sandhagen and Merab fight, Trevor Whitman kept calling for it, crash elbow, crash elbow. What does that mean? That basically means you've got a low base, you're creating a high guard, and you're showing step-in elbows, either from the rear side or from the lead side. You can do it off hand fighting, or you can do it just from a planted base and landing. One of the best examples of that, I always think, is Jonathan Haggerty against Superleg. One of the best examples of that. But I made a breakdown video this very week about Liam Harrison giving Khalil Roundtree some phenomenal tips with the elbows. And although he did very, very well, you have to get rid of Jiri when he's in that position. Now, that is easier said than done because the man, like I said, snatches victory from the jaws of defeat. I made a video on him this very week of him in Ryzen getting elbowed into the canvas. Basically, the referee is in the middle of them, and then he just manages to hit bump out of it, overturn the position, and then just lands a 6, 7, 8 shot combination together and lands every single one and puts his opponent to kip through the ropes. And he done it again. And I said earlier, and I'll say it again, when I watch a Jiri Prochazka fight, I'm more nervous if he's not getting really beaten up. Again, it just feels like a Tony Ferguson type fandom. I feel more nervous if he's not getting beaten up. If he's getting pieced up, I'm thinking, okay, he's probably close to nicking a win here. But if he's not getting pieced up, I'm thinking this probably is not going his way. This is not going his way at all. So what's next for Jiri? It's the question. I mean, what do you do with Jiri here? Because, like I said, you want new blood really in that division. I think Carlos Solberg makes all the sense to fight for the title next. But realistically, what I think could actually happen is we could see a vacant belt at light heavyweight between Jiri Prochazka and Carlos Solberg, and Tom Aspinall goes up and fights the winner of Cyril Gane and Tom Aspinall. That's what I foresee. I think it makes all the sense in the world. You've got that fight in 4 weeks. That gives Alex Pereira time to breathe. It gives him time to go to the fights in Abu Dhabi. And then it gives him time to go in the cage or make a call out or do his press run and then breathe a little bit and have maybe a month off. The other champ will have about a month off, and then boom. Let's start talking about dates. Let's start talking about times, because heavyweight Alex Pereira, we talk about his grappling and whatnot, but I don't know, I think Tom has a serious advantage, but are you telling me you can't see a world in where Tom looks for a takedown early in the first? Maybe he doesn't get it. Maybe he gets it later in the round, but how about if they clinch up and Alex Pereira's hips are feeling like concrete at 250 and he's starting filling into his frame a little bit for the first time ever in his athletic career, ever. And if you've ever seen him, you know the man's a beast. So you know he can fill into that frame a little bit more, a little bit heavier, probably feel a little bit fresher. He's depleting his body hugely going down to 205. We haven't actually really ever seen Alex Pereira at his optimal weight in MMA. Think about that right now. We have never seen Alex Pereira at his optimal weight in mixed martial arts. And he's won the middleweight gold, he's won light heavyweight gold, and he's got a chance to go up and fight for heavyweight gold. And we've never seen him at his optimal weight, in my opinion. I mean, you just think about what he's done in this short period of time. We look at the careers of a Merab, a Jose Aldo, a Anderson Silva, a John Jones, a Demetrius Johnson, a GSP. All of these people did incredible things. But they didn't do it in the time frame that Alex Pereira has come in and done this. And it is honestly sensational. So I think vacant title at light heavyweight, Jiri and Carlos Solberg, and Alex sits out and fights the winner. I think that's a no-brainer. Now the question comes back, what do we do with Merab? That's the next question. And we need to talk about that performance as well. This iced coffee is extraordinary. I think it's a Taylor's blend. Very strong. Five strength on the ground, beans. Merab Dvalishvili. Where do we begin? Honestly, when the fight started, I thought, oh, this is interesting because Corey looks good. He looks very good. I liked, and I'll tell you exactly what I liked about the early rounds for him. His takedown defense was incredible. And I always knew it was good. And I always knew he had the ability to invert and scramble and be safe and work. And we've always spoke about Merab's gas tank, but we also should speak about Corey's. And then if you actually think logically, he's been training at altitude for his entire career. I'm pretty sure that was where he was born, in around Denver. So this is a man with a phenomenal gas tank in himself and done many 5-rounders with the very best. So it's not like he's ever shown us signs to fatigue. But the reason why I liked it early days is he had a really low stance. He was still using his long weapons. He was still using his kicks or mostly his jabs. But he wasn't giving Merab the opportunity to come over the top, of his punches. This is something Brad Pickett speaks about a lot in fighting as a longer fighter. Now, what you do give up with that, for the most part, is calf kicks usually. It's harder to defend the low kicks when you're a little bit wider base. You have to give up something. But the truth of it is, fighting someone like Merab, he's not notorious for his leg kicking game. He will kick to the legs, but he's not notorious for that. He's not very, very high versed in that technique and landing a lot of clean shots there. So my point in saying that is it's a good trade-off, because you get a nice balanced base, you get long weapons, and he was just attacking him from space. And he was putting him behind his jab. and he was sticking it to the body. So it was making it very hard for Merab to get a beat on when to shoot and when was safe to shoot, because every time he thought was just okay, he would show a knee or he would show an uppercut. And in my opinion, he didn't show enough uppercuts earlier in the fight. And then I think it was in the third or fourth, he started showing the uppercuts and he landed a couple. And that's when he started to feel himself. And that's when he started to really get off and start having a couple of moments in the fight. And I don't think he at least showed that look early enough. I don't think we saw enough attacks down the middle. And I don't mean flying knees, because although I do think they're good to use and he does a good job of drawing people onto them, you can see every time Corey fights, as soon as he starts circling and drawing and he's not actually throwing anything, he's just using footwork and he's moving his opponent like this, you know he's drawing onto knees. Done it against Frankie Edgar, and I called it on a live stream at that time. So you can see he's doing that. But Merab's always just finding himself a little bit too far in range or a little bit too far out of range. And it looks accidental, but it's certainly not. And that's something Merab does so well, is his understanding of range. Because anyone that faces him or trains with him always mentions the fact that he gets takedowns from a distance that people aren't used to seeing takedowns from. And he does it at a crazy speed. And then he does it at this offbeat rhythm. So you're used to seeing people in front of you shoot takedowns from a certain range. You have this subconscious barrier in your mind when you're fighting of where people are going to do certain techniques from. They're going to kick from this range, they're going to box from this range, they're going to take down from this range. It's somewhat in the DNA of what you have as fight. But Merab just rips up the script. He does it with the distances, he does it with the timings, he does a great job punching into his takedowns, and he did a good job to discourage Corey off of his game. He managed to actually start applying pressure of his own and putting twos and threes together. And the reason why that was important is because then after Corey had that initial attack and defense after his punches, he would get tall. And that was where the problem come. Because as a tall fighter, the thing you don't want to do is the exact thing that he wasn't doing at the start, which is getting tall. And the reason why you sink your stance, like Brad Pitt always says in training, is because you don't give them the opportunity to come over your punches. They you for a range game now, which they can't do if you use it effectively. But Corey, when he was punching in combinations, and that's when the third and fourth shot started landing, Corey got hurt. And you could hear Trevor Whitman in his corner saying, stop getting, don't back up in a straight line. That's the only thing you're doing wrong. So it was a very high level chess game. And I knew Corey would be so skilled everywhere. I knew he'd give him problems on the feet. I knew he'd give him problems in the grappling to a certain extent in regards to he wouldn't sit still and be able to just get subbed or get attacked. I knew he'd always scramble and get back to his feet for the most part, which he did. But what Corey has shown is he's one of the best fighters pound for pound skill-wise, but he's never quite been able to get over that hump. And it just so happens that he's coming up against generational greats, by the way. You talk about he's lost to Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling is one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. He loses to Merab, one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. You look at the people he's lost to, TJ Dillashaw, one of the greatest fighters of all time, one of the best strikers of all time. So you look at the caliber of fighters he's lost to, there's no shame in that. But it does show that he's not been able to get over the hump. What is happening to the people on YouTube? H. Ongo, Mugs, Lou, appreciate it. What is happening? So Corey Sandhagen, for as good as he is, he's never quite been able to get over the hurdle. And I know it's a random reference, but it makes me think of this tennis quote that Marty Fish said, where he said, I never thought I was going to be as good as I was at tennis. And I got really good at one point. It just so happened I lived in an era of Rafael Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer. Three of the greatest tennis players of all time, if not the greatest three tennis players of all time. And sometimes you just so happen to grow up in an era with a John Jones, a Demetrius Johnson, an Anderson Silva, an Israel Adesanya. And that is what's happened for Corey Sandhagen. And he's still young to a certain extent, but there's only so many opportunities you get to fight for a title in the UFC. There's only so many. Now, do I think he has the skill set and the resiliency to try and scrape one back later down the road? Yes, but he has a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. And that leads to the question, what now for Merab Dvalishvili? what do you do with Merab? Because he's beat Sean twice, he's just beat Corey, he's beat Umar, and he 50-45'd Pereira. I know he called him out on the mic, and I know that's the narrative that's somewhat bubbling around. I don't love that. I'll be real with you. I really don't love that. The reason I don't love that is not because it's Pereira. In fact, that's one of my favorite fighters to watch. How can you sell the rematch off of that first one? And I'm not saying that Pereira has no chance. I'm really not, because he is, again, pound for pound, one of the most skilled, a dangerous Terminator that is in any fight over 25 minutes. But when you get 50-45 in the first, I don't know if I want to see that. I'll be real. I really don't care to be seeing that anytime soon. I know he's gone out there and he's done work and he's looked good, but I think the second fight with Umar makes sense. I really do think the second fight with Umar makes sense. I will come on to the PFL card a little bit later, Kev, because there's a lot of things circulating in the MMA world. We've got so much to get into. So with Merab, to round that off in regards to the performance, we need to touch a little bit more on that. Things. Firstly, I know it's a tired narrative, but I was at the O2 today, Hitman Fight League. I was ringside watching the Muay Thai and just watching that pace and that pressure up close, just seeing them relentlessly fighting the clinch, knee, elbow, kick. And then to just think about that with grappling exchanges. My mind cannot fathom 25 minutes of that at the highest level. It cannot fathom it. I've done a minute part of grappling. So just to think about doing that with striking at an elite level at a continuous pace for 25 minutes. You just sit in the room for 25 minutes and stare at a wall. That will feel like 24 hours. That is an extremely long period of time. Think about how long we actually had put our full attention on one thing for in a day. In one solid burst, probably not more than 5 minutes, especially with how people consume these days. So to be locked in for 25 minutes and do it at that pace, Merab Dvalishvili is nothing short of an absolute phenom. And he's not always the prettiest to watch. And he doesn't always have the most polished technique or refined style. But his ability to impose his will, to use his striking and blend it into his takedowns, to now threaten submissions, and to always be active. Yes, it may just look like knees to the thigh, but using big pendulum swings with a body log and a full Muay Thai style with a pendulum swing knee to the thigh. Take 5 of them and tell me they do not hurt. If you've got someone that's good in the clinch and they have good dexterity in the hips and they're landing knees to any part of the sort of side of the body, the hips, the thighs, that hurts. That hurts a lot. So to be that consistently active is super impressive. It really is. So that's what I think's next for Merab. Let's take a look at this main card and see what we need to get into. So we've done Merab, we've done Jiri. Oh my goodness, Yusuf Zalal. We need to speak about Yusuf Zalal right now. Actually, you know what, Kev? You've inspired me. Before I move on, I did see a young lad called Alfie fighting. Just to divert, someone said in the TikTok live stream, did I see someone called Alfie Pierce fight today? I did. I actually just posted some content of him on my Instagram of his knockout. For anyone that doesn't know the context, I filmed at a Muay Thai show today, Liam Harrison's show. And I got some really cool footage, actually. Some really cool footage of some good fighters. I'll be sharing that the next few days. So if you're interested in Muay Thai, keep an eye out across my YouTube and Instagram, because I'll be dropping all of that. But just to round off on the Merab point, because someone made a fantastic point, I completely overlooked the matchup I've been speaking about for ages, Pantoja. It's the only matchup really to make. I know we've got that one with Joshua Van in the works. So, like, is that official though? Because if that's not official, that's no hate on Joshua Van. I really respect what he's done so far. But it's more so, we can give him a title shot for the next 10 years. We can't really match up one of the greatest flyweights with one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. And in regards to a style for style, I don't know if there's, I wouldn't say it's the most intriguing, but I don't know if there's many more intriguing fights in the UFC to be made right now than Alexander Pantoja and Merab Dvalishvili. I don't know what else there is, because other than that, you're just doing rematches. And both men, for the most part, out their divisions. And I think everyone, where they're exhausted with double champions and moving weight classes, unless it's completely necessary. And you look at Pantoja, he's always said, put me in at flyweight, I'm going to defend this belt multiple times, and that's what I want to do. And I think that's what people love about him. And that's exactly what Merab's done now as well. So I think that's a no-brainer, especially with a point now where Pantoja is coming towards the end of his career. He's still looking fantastic, but he's got a style which is based off of pressure and the ability to, for the most part, walk through pressure and get to his spots. Now, he does that very well, but at times he has to eat shots to get there. Not so much recently, which is super impressive. But my point of saying that is not a style you want too much going in towards the back end of your career. So you don't want to be doing more extreme weight cuts towards the back end of your championship reign with a style that is as aggressive as that. So I think it would make sense for Merab and Pantoja, to be perfectly honest, just for a bit of fun. And I think the UFC are going to want to come out with a bang in 2026 with this new deal. And I think fights like that are really ways to do it. And the thing is as well, both men want to be active. I'll move on after this point, but this is an important one. Both fighters and champions in Pantoja and Merab want to be active. Active champions, we must, I implore, we must celebrate that, because it's one thing having a fight 3 times, 4 times in a year. That's actually very infrequent. That's what most fighters aim for. Not a lot of fighters actually get that in. Not a lot, especially at UFC, especially at the highest level. Because when you get to the highest level, it then becomes about calendars and dates and certain fighters only on certain times. And you actually have only sometimes 2 or 3 potential targets that you can actually fight. 2 of them are on holiday, one of them's having a baby, and all of a sudden you've got to wait 8 months. So the fact that Pantoja and Merab are just churning out these fights is insane. Insane. But we need to talk about Yusuf Zalal. That is a matter of priority in this live stream. We must unequivocally speak about Yusuf Zalal, because what he went out and did against Josh Emmett is nothing short of remarkable. Nothing short of remarkable, because it's hard to always judge a performance, because has Josh Emmett come towards the back end of his career where he's had a lot of tough fights and he's been at a lot of high level fights and got a lot of good wins? 100%. 100%. Do I think Josh Emmett has sort of had the sport pass him by in regards to skill set? I do. I do. It did worry me a little bit when I heard him speak about how much he'd prepared his power in the build-up to this fight card. Last thing you need to worry about. Last thing. Quite literally the last thing. You do not need to worry about your power, my friend. That is not a priority. Your priority is kind of what we saw, really, for the most part. And that's no shade on Josh Emmett. It's completely fair. He's been at that elite level, and it's hard to just say, okay, adapt your game drastically at the age of 38. It's very hard to do. But you see that next level of fighter, and Yusuf Zalal was that next level of fighter. He showed that. The fact that he was able to just get the timing on that takedown so perfectly within what was almost the first exchange, get him to the mat, and then just lock up that submission and get a verbal tap, is we've never seen that before. We've never seen that before. And yes, I do think Josh Emmett is a little bit limited in regards to his skill set, but let's not forget he's fought the very, very best competition It was only just recently I felt like he was fighting Ilia Topuria in a 5-round fight. Ilia Topuria couldn't finish him. Yusuf Zalal did it in about 10 seconds. We need to start having real conversations. And then we cast our mind back to the last person that Ilia Topuria couldn't finish. Just so happened to be Yusuf Zalal. Now, it was a very impressive performance by Ilia on his debut on a couple of days' notice. I was speaking to his manager about it the other day. The circumstances going into that fight were crazy, but he was very, very confident that he was going to win, and he did. But it just shows how talented Yusuf Zalal is. And we can't forget that this is a man who left the UFC and then has come back and is putting together a flipping generational run for a title shot. Generational. And he was saying at the end of it, Volk's not mentioning my name. Kel Surprise, my friend. Kel Surprise. No offense, but you're in a division right now where at the top of it, you have Evloev. You have Lerone Murphy coming for a phenomenal win. You know, you've got a lot of very good fighters at featherweight. A lot of very good fighters. And I understand why Yusuf Zalal was a little bit pissed off because he's putting together a decent streak, but he didn't have anything crazy to scream about. His last fight was the Calvin Kattar fight, where a lot of fans weren't happy with him because they felt like he let his foot off the pedal and he eased up a little bit and he let Calvin Kattar get back into it and he should have put the nail in the coffin. He came out, he said sorry, he went, I'm not doing that. Put his foot on the gas pedal and flipping got a finish in about 8 seconds flat. I mean, that was insanity. What do we do next with Yusuf Zalal? We need a big name for Yusuf Zalal. He called out Lerone Murphy. The question is, do they give Lerone Murphy the title shot? If they give Lerone Murphy the title shot, then I think you give Yusuf Zalal someone coming off a win in the featherweight division. Maybe you do the Evloev fight if they overlook him. Now, I think on merit, Evloev probably deserves it, but it's a what have you done for me lately? And that knockout by Lerone Murphy was spectacular. But it was just crazy the other day that Volk came out and said he thinks they're going in a different direction. So by the sounds of it, they're going to go Evloev. So I think it then makes sense to make a Yusuf Zalal versus Lerone Murphy. Now, are you going to be pissed off if you're Lerone? 100%. Coming off a fantastic knockout against the next big thing. It's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. And Evloev has found himself on the other side of that. So John Silver's there as well. But the only thing is, if you're getting someone coming off as... I do agree with you that it's a good matchup in John Silver. But the UFC have said, not necessarily in public, but for the most part in discussions behind the scenes, they want to match guys up that are winning and winning. So if you've got Yusuf Zalal, who's just come off his biggest win of his career on a massive card with Alex Pereira on it, and he's done it over a big name. I know John Silver is a big name, so it is a slightly different scenario, but they want to match him up with someone who's coming off a win. So I think it would make a lot more sense to them to give him a Lerone Murphy who's coming off a huge win, and they're not going to be opposed to saying, oh, you need one more. Mate, they've been stringing Evloev on for 20 fights. But I do like that fight. If we're talking styles, John Silver versus Yusuf Zalal is a phenomenal matchup. Phenomenal matchup. Yusuf Zalal's exciting because he's spot on with what he says. He's very smart. He's very smart. And what does that actually look like in the cage? Well, he's very elusive. He's hard to find. He's very hard to track down in both striking and grappling. So he's very hard to grapple offensively because it's hard to find his feet because he moves well so laterally and moving backwards. And he will switch stances and will give different looks from both. And he is just so smooth. He's just hard to track down. So people struggle to get their hands going. And he does a good job of now understanding where he's best and just getting to his spots. I think that's when fighters really start turning the page. And I was having this conversation this week, actually, with a couple of fighters. And I think about it when I watch Nath fight a lot in sparring. And I think about it when I watch Ilia Topuria. And obviously, the same manager. And I know the manager quite well. So I chat to him. And obviously, I watch his style a lot. But what you realize of the very high-level guys, they have 2 or 3 things that they do to an elite level. better than anyone else for the most part. And they just do those things a lot. And they do the rest pretty good. And in some cases, very good. Very good. And I think Yusuf Zalal's now got to this spot where he understands what he does well and what he does excellently. And he's doing a much better job now in his career of getting to those spots and getting to those spots quicker. And we're now seeing the fruits of that labor. And I think now he's getting a lot more confident on the mic. He's understanding who he is. He's growing into himself. He's actually getting a little bit of validation for the person that he thought he was all these years ago, and then gets released. And that chips away at your identity in some regard. And he's come back out and he's proved himself time and time again. He's put together a win streak. He's done a media run. He's gone on the Jackson podcast. People are starting to like him. He's great on the mic. And we're starting to see a real star emerge in 145-pound division. And that's a division that doesn't need much more entertainment, but we've just flipping got it with Yusuf Zalal. Buzzing, to be perfectly honest. I'm absolutely buzzing about that. And then let's talk about Joe Python. You'd like to see John Silver versus Zalal and Murphy versus Lopez. That's a very good question. Where does Lopez fit into all of this? I guess that's a four-man tournament, really. Before we move on from this matchup, I'll come on to the Joe Python win in a second. But before we move on, we've got to discuss that because John Silver and Yusuf Zalal and Lerone Murphy and Diego Lopez. Honestly, I think you can kind of flip a coin as to which way you put that fight. You can make that John Silver Murphy and you can make that Yusuf Zalal Lopez. I like two wins. I like two wins. I know that we've seen that fight already, the other one, so we can't make that one. But I like the big wins. I think we can work around that. So I think you got to get Evler with, but he's going to be fighting for the title. I don't know. It's a bit of a murky picture at featherweight. Let's go on to Joe Lopez. Joe Lopez just always on my mind, clearly. What a legend of the game that man is, by the way. Absolute G. Oh, I would love to put an Insta 360 or a pair of Meta Ray-Bans on Joe Lopez in Colombia. That is footage I would like for the behind the scenes. Regardless, Joe Python, not Joe Lopez. Now, this is going to sound a bit harsh. But I'm going to be honest about Joe Python. Now, he always fights with a chip on his shoulder. And just as a disclaimer, I watched the full story of Joe Lopez. I keep saying Joe Lopez. I cannot help that. I've watched the full story of Joe Python unfold. When he was first on Contenders, I watched that live. That was when I watched every episode. I winced as I saw his elbow go crazy. And then the comeback story, and to do it all homeless, and then to get a tremendous contract and come in with a chip on his shoulder and just kind of say, I'm the new kid on the block ready to knock everyone out. Dana White's giving him a house and letting him drive his Lambo and all of this. And I was fully rooting for him, happy for him. Still am, to be honest, chasing his dream. And what I do like about him, although I don't necessarily love the turn that he has taken with the fans and this kind of heel roll, but that's just because I wouldn't do it. I don't hate it in regards to a narrative standpoint. I actually think it's pretty entertaining. He's not necessarily my cup of tea, but you tune in to watch him fight and he does have tremendous power. So you do have to respect that he's going to be able to potentially provide a knockout. However, and this is no shade, this is just what I believe to be very honest. Do I think he can beat a lot of middleweights who are going to be not able to grapple with him and get stuck on the feet and not really have enough tools to cause him too much damage because he's durable, he's young, he's got good enough defense for the most part, and he's going to land his shots? Yeah, I do. But when I look at him higher up the division, I'm not saying he can't work his way up there, but I'm just saying at the moment, I think he runs into a lot of problems with those guys with their next level of striking. I think he can beat a lot of guys at middleweight, don't get it twisted. But I just think the next level at striking, because you're getting to see some high-level guys at middleweight in regards to the striking. You really are. For me, we know he has a phenomenal weapon, which is the right hand. We've seen that. But in the fight with Kelvin Gastelum, I remember thinking he was just too one-dimensional. There wasn't enough setups to it. When you have that nuclear option, by all means spam it, because more times than not, you're going to knock someone on the floor and you're going to be able to follow up with heavy ground and pound or maybe just knock them out flat. But you have to find different setups to that shot. And you'll find a lot of times he doesn't, in my opinion, at the moment, have good enough cage control where he's cutting off his opponents with his footwork, hitting them in to start landing his shots. He doesn't change his level enough with his best in the body enough and then come over the top. He doesn't, in my opinion, do at cutting off the cage and closing down his opponent. I feel like too many times they get let off because he's throwing a right hand and they're circling away from it and he can't quite catch them. That's what I feel like when I watch Joe Puffer. So it's not he doesn't have skills. He has all the potential, a lot of raw ability, and a lot of willpower. And like I said, a large chip on his shoulder. And that counts for a lot in MMA. So I do feel like he could go very far. I just feel like he has to make some adjustments to his game. I feel like he's just got to add a few more layers onto those punches. I feel like he's got to use a few more feints. I feel like he's got to just, again, change the level a little bit more with his shots. Because if he's just continuously showing that right hand as a fastball, it makes me think of Waldo Acosta. Not quite to that level, but similar. It becomes very predictable. So you start facing people like even Sean Strickland, to be perfectly honest. Sean Strickland will see that all day long. I know he's powerful and potentially can clip him 100%, but Sean Strickland will see that coming. Imavov will see that coming. There's a lot of guys at that kind of division that do have good striking and just a different level in regards to what they're giving you. You have to give more looks to set that up when you get to the higher level. When you're floating around top 15s and outside of, you can get away with that. For example, Abbas Nurmagomedov or Magomedov, I'm never that impressed with him. He has moments in all of his fights, but he always tires. And I think he kind of, you hear fighters say that sometimes in fights, they have fighters almost give them the submission. You felt like he was rear naked choke. And the reason I say that is because the commentators were even saying, why is he not fighting the hands? Any fighter in the UFC knows, as soon as someone starts attacking a rear naked choke, you fight the hands. Fight the hands. He was hurt. He was tired. And there's no shame in that. It's just an observation. And we've seen him in that spot a few times in his fights before. So you get someone who's young, who's hungry, who's fresh, who's going to be well conditioned, who's in the room with very high level guys like Sean Brady, who's always going to be in shape, who's always going to grind. They're doing very good things in that gym out of Philadelphia. Is it Philadelphia? I'm never that good with the areas in America, but you get my point. Piper versus Gregory Rodriguez. I think that's fun. I think that's very fun. I think that's a very good matchup, to be perfectly honest. I think that gives a very good look, to be honest, because Piper does occasionally like to, when he is aggressive, does like to wrestle, and he is aggressive. And what I like about him as well, he'll go away and he'll do jiu-jitsu competitions. He'll do grappling competitions. Same as Sean Brady, and they'll test their skills like that. And he's got a heavy top pressure game. So he starts adding subs and heavy elbows, be a real problem. And then you think about Gregory Rodriguez, we forget that that man is a jiu-jitsu savant because he goes in there and just bazookas people. And he is so fun to watch. Would you look at him as a striking coach and think that he's perfect? No, you flipping wouldn't. You wouldn't. Occasionally leaves his feet behind him, blitzes with his chin in the air on the center line. But he'll throw in combinations, he'll throw hard, and he'll throw with intent. And if you're not coming correct, he might just finish you in the first round. I love RoboCop. So fun to watch. And just elite level of jiu-jitsu that we completely just brush over for the most part. Because he's always just in these exciting fights. Always. So you've got RoboCop floating around. I don't hate the idea of a Jared Cannonier. I don't hate the idea. I think that is an interesting step up. I think that does kind of answer the question for Jared Cannonier of there's no shame in it. He's getting to what, 40 years of age. That's a tough fight. But the truth of it is, the durability is going to become the number one question. But if we're talking skill sets, if we're talking just skill sets, I definitely think Jared Cannonier can get that. And I must say as well, if it's Jared Cannonier over 3 rounds against Joe Pyfer, I'm not saying Cannonier can't go in there and get chinned. He most certainly can. However, can Cannonier be savvy enough to tie up in the clinch, wear on the arms a little bit of Joe Pyfer, stick him behind a few jabs, switch stances, don't give him too many of the same looks, and just confuse him enough to not be able to scrape 2 rounds? I can definitely see that. I can 100% see that. For sure. Let's speak about a couple of the other fights on the card. How long have we been going for? 50 minutes. We've been flying. There were some good fights today. Someone said they saw me at a fight show the other day. Let me scroll back up to that. Hey, I met you at Wolkenite event a couple of months ago. Thank you for the pick and being so nice, bro. You're more than welcome. I remember you. Was your name Joseph? I may have completely pulled that out of the air. But I do remember you had cornrows, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe your name was Louis, possibly. One of the two. Don't take any offense to that. It's hard to remember the names, especially when it's just a passing high and by. But just before I go into the next couple of fights, I mentioned a couple of times, but a couple of people have. No, this is live. This is live. We're rolling live. A couple of people asking, "Are we live?" No, we're live. We're rolling off of the back of the card. I don't usually do a post card recap, but that one got me buzzing, to be perfectly honest, and I've needed a little breath of fresh air in the MMA world. You become very numb to it almost. Very numb to it. You watch a lot of fights at all levels from the ground up. You watch sparring every week. Very grateful for all of those things, but you see a lot of fighting. Although there's good fights most weekends, it's hard to stand out in so many. But I was at Hitman Fight League today. That was a lot of fun, actually. A lot of fun. I absolutely love Muay Thai shows. Now, if I'm going to be honest, was it as good as the last time I went there at the O2? And for anyone that doesn't know, Hitman Fight League is Liam Harrison's Muay Thai show. So it's him, Liam Harrison, and then also his brother, Andy Badco, you may know him as, who run that promotion. And it's fun. It's really fun. But last time they had an incredible Thai restaurant catering in the front for the audience that would go and pay and buy a buffet and whatnot. But they had it in the back for all the staff and the media as well. So they had really, really nice Thai food. And that was powerful. Didn't have it this time. That was a shame. But there were good fights. And I did get some good content. So I was happy about that. But that was fun earlier. That was really fun. And there's something different about watching Muay Thai up close. Just with the ropes, it's a lot better than cage. But regardless, going back to the card, let's talk about Patchy Mix. Let's talk about Patchy Mix. That's a good place to bring this back to. What is next for Patchy Mix? Some people believed he won that fight card. Now, I don't think you're crazy for saying that. I would have to go back to feel more passionately about it than I do currently. It's one of those ones. However, anyone that even thought he won, I don't think they'd be able to look you in the eye and tell you that the other fella didn't deserve to win either. It was a close fight in a lot of aspects. And I didn't know when I was watching it, was I favouring it to the debutant more because you're not expecting him to do as well? But I knew he was very talented. He was what, KSW champion? That's pretty impressive. I didn't love that much. I really didn't love that. But I also kind of loved the fact that he was sticking his middle finger up to Patchy Mix because that's his move. That's his move. So got missed on a couple of people. Again, didn't love the fact he was giving up position, jumping guillotines, but he didn't get touched. He jumped guillotines, went to his back, and then got back to his feet untouched every single time. So I know it wasn't the most exciting, maybe, and maybe not the smartest move just in general for damage. But in regards to just a skill set for skill set, top trump, who's got the highest number, that was kind of crazy. Because guillotines and front chokes is Patchy Mix's bag. And that's why I actually think that was such a disastrous loss. And I don't say that lightly. And I want him to be a big star in the UFC. I want him to have ripple effects. I want massive fights. But to come into the UFC, to have the performance he did on debut, regardless of the circumstances, and then come in against someone who's very talented and a champion outside the organization, but to the casual fan, they have no idea who that is. Not a Scooby. They're just seeing some geezer with a blonde hair jumping guillotines and thinking is some disciple of Charles Oliveira. They have not got a Scooby what KSW even is. And that may not even be the champion that he's of. And that is exactly my point. But these people are good. And he's got a more well-rounded and deeper bag than Patchy Mix. And what was very apparent tonight with Patchy, and what people will realize, is the blueprint is completely out there to beat him. It's completely out there to beat him. And now we know that the experiment, for the most part at the top, is over. It's over. Because in a night where you watch Corey Sandhagen and Merab go toe-to-toe, and be able to fight in every discipline of martial arts, you start realizing that Patchy Mix doesn't have the bag deep enough to mix it, pardon the pun, at the very elite at 135. He simply does not. As soon as he gets put on the back foot, he has no answers. He has no answers. He doesn't have good enough offensive wrestling in the first place to get to a lot of these spots against high guys. So when he gets put on the back foot, it's even harder. It's very difficult to grapple on the back foot. And he doesn't have good enough striking on the back foot to then really cause problems. Has a decent left hand that he'll land a couple of times here and there, and he will land shots. And it's not that he didn't land anything. I'm just being critical because he thinks of himself as a champion, and rightly so, because he has skills to create that narrative. He will be in the training room submitting Merab. He's admitted that. Everyone I've heard that's ever trained with him or been in the vicinity of him says how good he is, how talented he is. But it's a different thing when you're in a fight and someone's at fight speed and they can back you up, and you don't just have this sort of comfortability where you can kind of find your ranges a little bit easier because you're on an open mat and people are bumping into you. So you don't actually have a full cage and you can get more movement off, and you're not always moving backwards. Very different. Very different. Going forwards, he's not got enough tricks. Again, it's going back to what I said about Joe Python. This is not being scathing. This is just because these are people that want to achieve the very best, and so they should. To do that, you have to firstly be good everywhere. You have to be good and excellent in some areas. But you have to be able to basically fight what John Wood would say, top to bottom. You have to fight punching backwards, forwards, sideways. You have to be able to grapple going forwards off your back, be able to have attacks from side, be able to have damage against the cage. You have to be able to 360, be able to fight at a decent level. Patchy Mix doesn't have a deep enough bag to mix it. Again, sorry to do that. Unintentional at the very top. Just doesn't. Just doesn't. So I don't know what you do with him now. It's a really interesting one. Because, sorry, I tried to keep that one in so I didn't sneeze in the mic. Because now you look at him and you think, what do the UFC do? They're probably paying him a few quid, and they know that he's not Merab, Corey, Umar, Sean O'Malley even. Come on. Too much for him. Too much for him. Just on the feet alone. Just way too much for him. So I'm not too sure what he does next at all. That was a really big fight for him tonight. And I know like it sounds like I'm being drastic, but that was a massive fight for him tonight. And he just wasn't able to get it done. And I don't know where he goes from here. We need to speak about Gaultier. We need to speak about this fella. Atiba. Okay, I need to verify. Yeah, we need to speak about, let me pronounce his name as Atiba Gaultier. Cameroon had Francis Ngannou. Ghana has this geezer. This is who they have. I think of all of the incredible Ghanaian footballers throughout the years, and this is the streets will not forget. This is, in my opinion, the sort of, I want to say the middleweight in Ngannou for a lot of reasons, for his story and his sheer physique and his knockout ability and power, and more than that, his instinct and finishing ability. But that is a disservice to his actual striking ability, because it is not typical you get anyone at any division with the ability to move backwards, floating backwards and landing a knee as their opponent's advancing on the chin. I don't care what level of opponent it is. That is not easy to do. The mechanics of that, the footwork of that, the timing of that, and the ability to execute it under the lights and have the confidence to do so, that is very special. Very special. And the fact that he's doing it at 200 pounds and he's doing it consistently, boom, 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 under the bright lights of the UFC, the sky is the limit. The limit. And it feels like a minute since we've had an exciting middleweight which really gets you up out your feet. It feels like we're watching the sort of early becomings of Israel Adesanya, just with more brute knockout power. Even towards the end of the fight, it isn't just the power that's getting it done, it's the techniques. You look at him clinch up, just stupidly strong frames, stupidly strong. I couldn't even imagine when this man gets double collars, it's done. There's no pummeling. There's no pummeling. That man's got a double tie clinch. You're just going to see stars. I just want to see him versus Paulo Costa. I just want to see him against Paulo Costa. I don't know what that says in the division. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that's too soon. I don't know what the numbers are. I want to watch him versus Paulo Costa. That's what I want to watch. Now, is it an experiment I think we should rush? 100% not. But I'm looking at him thinking, I need him against something a bit more, because he's going against these people that I'm just knowing he's going to smoke. So we need him a challenge. So maybe a Robocop Gaultier. Maybe a Robocop. Maybe a Joe Pyfer Gaultier. I don't know. Francis Ngannou versus Atiba is a Francis Ngannou Michael Morales hybrid. That's a phenomenal way to put it. It's someone with a big frame for their weight class, but someone who has such smooth movement. Smooth movement. And sometimes you hear these words and you think, what does that actually mean? What is smooth movement? Well, it's the ability to get around the cage and do so balanced. So when you're moving backwards, you're in a balanced position to strike. A lot of people are not doing this. They're just evading. They're just trying to get out of the way for the most part, get away from the punches. But they're not putting themselves in a balanced, set position to then not evade the shot, but to return. So when their opponent's out of position and they've exerted, boom, they're in a position to land back. That's what that means. And he has that ability in abundance. Abundance. And that's exciting for middleweight. There's so many fun matchups you can make for him. And just as I'm thinking about that, can we just have a second to acknowledge the most rogue matchmaking ever in the UFC? Oral Buyer versus Jack Hermansson at welterweight. I would love to see the behind the scenes of how that fight came together, because there are some fights that just leave me perplexed. And Oral Buyer versus Jack Hermansson at welterweight in Qatar is one of the most rogue fights I've ever heard of in my life. I woke up, I looked at my phone, I saw that announcement, and honestly thought it was April and thought it was somewhat of an April Fool's joke. And the world just loves Oral Buyer, and I thought this was a new meme. No, this is an actual fight. Very bizarre. I want to hear what you think we should do next with Atiba, because there's so much fun for him. It really is. Like I said, you can do Robocop. I think that's a ton of fun. I don't know where. I think Paulo Costa is quite high in the rankings, but I think that's pretty fun as well. I think if you really want to go high up the divisions, you can go Jared Cannonier. Obviously, that is pretty high. But it just depends what you want to do with him. I think you can just start giving him some higher competition, to be honest, because it just seems like he's going to smoke anyone that is just behind the 8 ball. Doesn't quite have the speed, doesn't quite have the eyes. I think he's just going to absolutely smoke everyone. Oh, Jesus. Atiba versus Shara Bullet. Is that what we're trying to do? Is that what we're really trying to do? That is... That's a firecracker of a matchup. I'll be honest. I think Shara Bullet is undersized. Just my initial thoughts. But that man is talented. And if his last fight taught me anything, he is down to scrap. To a different level. Different level. There are just levels to gameness. And Shara Bullet, I realized in his last fight, has that to the last factor on that dial. Because he was throwing with just fight-ending intentions every single strike till the end of the bell. And the bell's still going and he's still trying to land axe kicks and elbows and he's all cut open and he's just firing back. The fella's got one eye. Ridiculous. Honestly ridiculous. There's a lot of people who come in and they got a funny haircut and they got a cool Russian name and they throw a few fun kicks, but they get found out and the experiment dies pretty quickly. It happens a lot. Although there's a lot of successful people from Dagestan and places like that, there's also a lot of failed experiments we can't forget. Shah Bullet is not one of them. Sure, he's lost fights, but he's lost them to the best. He lost what? A kickboxing fight to MVP. Better men have tried and failed. Better men have tried and failed. So I absolutely love that matchup. That's phenomenal. Big fan of that. Edmund Shabazian gets another win. Andre Muniz, I feel like that was a nice matchup for him, I felt. He's just getting his groove, isn't he, Arman? He's someone that's just understanding what he does well and just finding his spots and getting to them quicker. And that's what I like about that with Edmund, sorry. Obviously, he came into the UFC super young. We all know the narrative. Got rushed a little bit, or maybe didn't even get rushed, just found himself fighting very flipping grizzled vets at a very young age against tough, hardened men. When you have boy bones and they're not toughened and you're feeling man strength and they're just in full man elbowing you, sometimes it just takes a few years physically to mature a touch. And he's finding himself to just get to his spots. And don't get me wrong, I'm not looking at him thinking, okay, he's trouble in the top 5 just yet. But if he keeps putting wins together and he keeps using sort of fundamental strikings to sort of get the hands high, go to their level changes, grind out positions, get dirty, use good head positions, elbows in the clinch. Then when they get to the ground, landing ground and pound, being active with the ground and pound, that's becoming a real problem. He's becoming a real problem. And like I said, he's now becoming experienced and he's got a lot of reps and XP. So he's becoming someone you need to keep an eye out for sure. For sure. Yeah, like you said, it sometimes just takes a while to find yourself. I think as fans, it's very easy for us to see the best case scenario, right? We look at someone's skill sets and just think, okay, have it all figured out and all together and all at once. But sometimes it's the intangibles that you can't quite quantify as much. Feeling more comfortable in yourself, your private life, your family life, you're more settled. Maybe your commute to the gym is just next to where you live now instead of doing a 6-hour round trip. That's just the case for some of these people. And although it doesn't sound that crazy, all these things add up. I'm not saying that's the case for him, but my point is you never quite know when it's going to click for a fighter. Sometimes it never does. Sometimes you hear fighters say, oh man, the craziest thing is I wish I was able to put it together like I can now in the gym technically back when I was in my prime, because now I actually understand how to finally set up my striking even better with the grappling that I started learning once I stopped fighting. What a lot of people don't realize is when you fight a lot, you don't get a lot of time to learn. You don't really get a lot of time to learn because when you're in fight camp, most of it is spent kind of sharpening your skills, not learning them. And you may have heard that a lot, but it's true. So if you're constantly in fight camp, you're not always getting to learn a ton of skills. You're just sharpening what you already have. And a lot of people are going to say Josh Emmett is getting towards the end of his career. True. A lot of people are going to say he's 40. True. I don't care what you say. That was crazy impressive. I don't care how old they are, what style they have, what they've done recently. If you are in the top of the 145-pound division in the rankings for however long, and you've never, I don't think he's ever been finished in the first round ever, and you go out there and do that on a big card, I mean, come on. That's a statement performance. In regards to a performance, if you said to Yusuf Zalal before that fight, right, let me know quickly, if this could go the best case scenario, what does that look like? You'd say, probably go out there, take him down and sub him without him landing a punch. You go, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good. You should probably do that, mate. Okay, sweet. I'll go and do that. And he does. And he cuts a good promo as well, to be fair to him. He does sound like Kevin Hart. He 100% sounds like Kevin Hart. I cannot unhear that. You close your eyes and listen to Yusuf Zalal, you cannot hear anyone but Kevin Hart. It's kind of crazy. But it kind of adds to it. It makes it funnier. And he's pretty good. He's pretty good content, to be fair. He's pretty good content. But in regards to the fight card, I think that's pretty much it. We've got one more fight that I'll just touch on before we bounce. Chris Gutierrez and Farid Basharat. Because that was a very impressive performance from Farid Basharat. Of course, his brother. You know what? I'm watching that fight and I'm actually thinking, I turned to my mate Frank and I said, we actually live a very weird universe because it was only a few months ago I was in Manchester after the fights in the hotel with no one around. It was just me and a couple of people. Volk was next to me, and that was when the Basharat brothers had a fight with MVP, slapped him in front of me, and then he's chasing after MVP, and Volk's trying to rugby tackle him and sidestep him. And this is all happening under my nose. And I'm just thinking, what is going on? And this was a couple of days after that Mohamed Makayev and Manel Cap got into it. So this was just the weirdest fight week of all time. It was all happening. It was all happening. I found myself grappling Brad Pickett in my boxers at 11 p.m. after Chance Eric Nixon. It was very strange. Michael Bisping hit me with a keep it casual in the bar. UFC Manchester was actually a very weird time, I'll be real. A great time, a weird time. But my point is, the Basharat brothers getting into beef with MVP was a strange turn of events at 7 a.m. in the morning. The reason why I saw it is because we got back from the arena, bearing in mind it was the late one. So we get back about 6 a.m., 6:20, something like that. The buffet didn't open until 7 a.m., bearing in mind we're checking out that day at 10, 11. So I thought I'll stay in the lobby till 7, go to the buffet. The breakfast was incredible. Get a breakfast, go back, maybe have an hour's kip, and then crack on. But this was all kicking off next to me. What I didn't realize on top of that, Volk then goes and makes a video about it all happening, but he didn't disclose the names. I didn't know he made a video. So I just went away and just said, you never guess what happened. This was crazy. And I ended up getting sent a video of someone that was watching it from the outside of the hotel. I managed to just get sent that. So I made a video on it. It goes crazy viral. And then everyone goes, oh, this is who Volt was talking about. I didn't realize he didn't say the names. I did. I don't care. He was saying UFC fighters. I'm obviously going to give people the juice. They're going to find out eventually. So you might as well just find out 5 minutes earlier. Thought it was funny, to be honest. Didn't really think it was anything crazy. But yeah, random side tangent. Going back to Callan Lochran. Is he doing okay? I don't know, honestly. I don't know him to that level. I know him obviously as a fighter. I follow him and we've interacted a couple of times and whatnot, but I don't know him personally enough on a level to to speak to how he's getting on a personal level. You never know what's going on behind the scenes, really. That's the truth of it. You never know what's going on behind the scenes, both physically and mentally. That's what's crazy. I was saying to my friend today, even when I was at the Muay Thai show, I watched the whole build up to this guy's camp and him get ready and him warm up, hit pads, talk to his coach, all the 9 yards. He comes out, next prospect, turns pro in a couple of years. Boom, first exchange, gets a right hand down the pipe, probably mildly concussed for the rest of the fight, goes out and wins. But my point is, you never actually know what's going on in the fight or by. So potentially there's a lot going on in his life. I don't know. All I do know is that was a tough fight to get because Jack Cartwright's very good and he's a savvy vet and he's a tricky style to fight, especially on short notice. And that's a tough look for Callum Lochran. It just is. It is a tough look because he does a great job on the mic. He knows how to promote a fight. He knows how to sort of get people talking. And I like that about him, to be honest. And he goes and puts it on the line. I like that about him. But you got to get a win. It's the tough thing. And it's a hard thing to do, but you have to get a win. And I appreciate it was a short notice opponent. And there was a change from Lewis McGrillen, which was going to be an amazing fight. But Lewis, when you're preparing for McGrillen, the crazy thing is he originally is actually a grappler. You go back to his amateur days when pretty much when me and my friend spoke to him on the podcast 3 years ago, I think it was. He'd just coming out the amateurs. He was actually more so a grappler. A lot of people don't really know that, but he just started laying everyone out viciously with a left hand. And people thought he was a striker, and then he just started falling in love with that power, and kind of rightfully so. My point is, you prepare for Lewis McGrillen, sure, you work in your grappling, and Callum Lochran had a grappling game plan, so he would have been working his own, but he would have been training for a striker. Now, I appreciate it's a southpaw, but you would have been training for a striker, so he would have been getting striking looks. And I know the level he holds himself to, he'd like to think that he could adapt to getting a southpaw look and then, preparing for a southpaw and then getting different looks inside the cage from a different opponent. But like I said, Jack Cartwright's tough. He's tough. He didn't look okay to that fight before it started. I don't know. But that's the thing. You never quite know what's going on. And a lot of fighters, they don't speak about it. And people like him, to be fair, he's not really someone to make excuses too much. I don't think he's going to come out and say, I had this going on and that going on. I think if someone asks him, he'll be honest. And I think that's a mistake a lot of fans make sometimes. They'll hear interviews of people talking about things and they'll say, oh, they're just making excuses. More times than not, it's just an interviewer saying, oh, did you have anything going on behind the scenes? Was family life okay? And they go, oh, I actually had some problems with XYZ. And people go, oh, here we go. Here's the excuses. It's like, there's a difference between an excuse and conveying reality and what may have had some impact onto the fight. Do I think it had an impact in regards to him using consistent diversity of attacks in his offense? No, because we've seen that a couple of times. Do I think it could have hindered his performance to a certain extent? Yeah, I do. I do. And he did start to have success towards the end of the fight when he just started to get into his groove, but a little bit too late. And you hear it a lot, like you said, a lot of fighting is mentality, but a lot of that is sometimes just being kind of on in the moment, just being channeled, focused. Even small things like people with cameras next to the cage and whatnot, it's very easy to catch eyes with them, and boom, you catch eyes just with one person, and it can just divert your focus for a second. And you do that at a high level of fighting, and boom, you can just take a stiff jab. And I was saying this to my friend today. We was talking about these concussions that we see in sparring. Just like people don't realize how frequent concussions are in sparring. They don't understand. They really don't, for the most part. People that don't spend a lot of time in the gym don't realize. And I don't spend loads of time in the gym and in different gyms, and I realize how ubiquitous they are. So anyone who trains a lot will understand that it doesn't take as much as people think. People think you have to have teammates sitting down on huge right hands. Not really. You can just rock up on a Tuesday sparring, a little bit tired from the night before because you've not had a great night's sleep and you was in traffic, so you didn't manage to get a stretching and you feel a little bit rushed, and boom, you just walk into a stiff jab and all of a sudden it snaps your neck. You didn't really see it coming and you've got a headache for 20 minutes and you can't really remember what round it is. It's not really spoke about enough. Kind of went off on one there, but yeah, I appreciate the comments in the live stream. I'm glad you like the content. Prime example, the stoppage, the Magny fight. Yeah, it really is. And Magny is just such a savvy vet. We know this by now. This is not a secret. But Neil Magny is just so impressive. A lot of people, fans, will look at careers and be very quick to summarize them as someone who didn't achieve much. Oh, he wasn't a champion. Oh, he lost to this person. People don't realize that sometimes there's a lot of value, sometimes more value in having a career where you're at the very top of it, decades. Rather than there's some people out there, sure, they reached the top and they got championship status, but they only held that belt for one fight and no one remembers their name. And you've got people like Neil Magny who are setting records for the most fights and the most wins and finishes and the amount of comebacks and the people that he's fought on his resume is just ridiculous. Win, lose or draw, go and look at the names that Neil Magny has fought ever since the day one. Every time that man steps in the cage, he's fighting an absolute menace. Menace. Grapplers, strikers, knockout artists, cardio guys. He's fought them all. Long, tall, short, explosive, slower pace, grueling pace. Every single one of them he's fought. And there is just a lot of value in that. A lot of value in that. People think, oh, if you didn't become 10-time champion, you didn't have a good career. Sometimes just playing a certain amount of caps in the Premier League is actually what's impressive, even if you didn't score that many goals. Sometimes just being in the big leagues for an extended period of time at the top level is a very, very hard skill to do that 0.01% of people do. So you look at careers like Neil Magny, you appreciate things like that. Can I pay you to video call? You can. I'm more than happy to sort of help if you have. I do consulting, so that's basically what I do in my consulting. So you're more than welcome to book in a session for sure. I think that fight was more about IQ than skill. The Neil Magny fight, that's my point, right? That's my point. It's just the IQ thing. When you get that many reps, it's just the ability to know when to be relaxed, when to just stay calm, when to weather the storm, when to just find a spot to get a respite, when to find a spot to land a bit of damage, where to have a bit of activity, where to nick around here and there. It's just the ultimate savviness. And if you're someone that's got less reps and you're maybe a 12-0 fresh-faced pro that's knocked everyone out and has only actually had 20 minutes of cage time, coming against Neil Magny, yeah, it may not be the most intimidating matchup, but it's a flipping tricky puzzle to solve. If you get yourself in a spot of bother, he will capitalize. And he's shown that time and time again. And it's seriously impressive to stay in the fight that long and then keep flipping winning at high level. What's happening, Ben? It's hard to say. I can't watch that performance and say it was boring. I can't. Just because of the sheer output. And he's had fights before where he's had output, but there hasn't been output of strikes. But he is putting his hands. He is putting his hands before his takedowns and his takedown and hands after his takedowns now. And when he's got body locks, he's not just stalling. He is getting better in that clinch position with knees. I know it doesn't look a lot, but if you've got someone that's strong in a clinch position and they're landing big, big swinging knees into your thighs, that hurts. That slows you down. Then he's going into the body. And then on the exits, he's ripping to the body occasionally. And then he's just giving you a look at the takedown. I don't know. It's flipping impressive. It's just impressive. I can't. if I find something just so impressive that just honestly has me in awe, it actually by definition is not not boring to me personally. I appreciate that some people would watch that and not be enthralled. I actually fully understand. I'm not going to sit here and say I couldn't imagine why. I completely get it. There's a lot of things that he does which are appreciated on a finer level, but on a more surface level, I appreciate is not always blockbuster. There are parts for sure, but I can see that. I can certainly see that. Where you look at someone like Alex Pereira is a fantastic example to liken that to. Incredible athlete in so many different ways. He has that sort of blockbuster, gonna put someone away with one punch, keep your eyes peeled. Merab doesn't quite have that, but you can't take your eyes off of him because the man's just constantly shooting. And someone that's having 29 million shots and getting 19 takedowns on Corey Sandhagen is just kind of unfathomable, really, when you think about it. I appreciate the gift gallery, Martignago 5. Here's a question. Obviously, UFC is the highest level. Got gifted a mustache. I appreciate everything. Is the shed waterproof? Before I answer the question about the UFC, one thing I will say about the shed. It was the first structure I'd ever built with my bare hands. And at this point, I'd never done any construction work because I hadn't done my final job, which was constructions. And I'd never done it at that point, so I didn't have any skills, less than none. My friends all did those sort of jobs. I put it together. I go to Bournemouth. And as I go to Bournemouth, it comes, boom, breaking news all over the news, the radio. My mum's messaging me. Gone underwater in the worst flood it's ever seen, ever in history of like 60 years. It's on the news. The train station's underwater. And I've just built this shed. I've turned to my mate and gone, oh my goodness. He was like, what? The shed. Said, what about it? I said, I built it. And we've just got the worst storm of all time. I honestly thought I was going to come back and it was halfway down the road. I came back, bearing in mind that it's got rock wall insulation, which you just cannot get wet. And it's got wallpaper, bone dry. It's got this sofa. It's got a £300 mat that I got off Facebook Marketplace for a score. And obviously, it's got TVs and things like that. I don't really use the TVs too much. I just got them for a score as well, Facebook Marketplace. But more so the wallpaper, bone dry. Literally, a little bit damp in the corner, but that's it. So, yes, it is waterproof and it is quadruple insulated. Regardless, coming back to the original question, whether UFC or any organization, can anyone beat Merab other than Pantoja? Can any organization beat Merab? Beat Merab? No. Not that I know of. Not that I know of. I can't think of who would do it at the moment. I really don't know. There's no one immediately close. Bilal's very good. Bilal is very good as well. But the truth of it is, right, you look at Bilal and he's fought a lot of very good fighters actually. Probably doesn't get enough credit for that. Merab, I think you wouldn't be crazy to say that Merab has a top 5 resume of all time. I don't think that's a hot take. In fact, I actually think that's a pretty fair and reasonable take. Merab Dvalishvili has a top 5 resume in mixed martial arts. Fact. I'm just dropping a fact on that. Corey Sandhagen, not a champion, but fought in multiple championship fights, and anyone that's ever watched him compete will know he is elite. You have to be elite to beat him. Fact. He has then beat Sean O'Malley, a champion, defending champion, twice via stoppage in the second. He has fought former champion Petr Yan, former champion and legend Jose Aldo. You just look at Marlon Moraes and the way that he's beat these guys, just putting a pace on them. It's one thing to be an incredible grappler, it's one thing to be an incredible striker, but everyone to a certain extent can get better cardio to a certain extent. He's just built different. But my point is, everyone can be in good shape. This guy is in better shape than anyone that's ever played or participated, I should say, in the sport. And in a sport of supremely conditioned athletes, no one has ever been able to put on a better display of cardio than this man right there. That in itself is a ridiculous achievement. Nice one, Ben. Everyone doesn't know that they're in the presence of greatness right now. The Toe Wrestling World Champion, 4-time World Champion, is currently in the chat. 4-time World Champion, the highest paid toe wrestler of all time. A sport which is over 50 years old. He's the world's highest prize winning toe wrestler. 4-time in a row World Champion. First person to ever do that in history. Quite the history maker. Pereira and Umar will have great careers. They will. And sorry, that's another one. Beat Umar again. And the Magomedov, undefeated. Phenomenal fighter. I'm missing a ton of guys as well. I just, off the top of my head, I can't think. I've missed a lot of fighters that he's fought. But my point is, Merab Dvalishvili's resume is on par with anyone's. Anyone's. And a lot of these guys he's fighting in their prime as well. I need to add that in. I'm sure you can look at... people say about Jose Aldo. He came back to the UFC and he was the only geezer who could stop his takedowns. I actually argued that Jose Aldo was still the best bantamweight in the world at that point, to some extent. Over 3 rounds. I need to chuck that in there. Over 5, I think he gets paced by a lot of people, but I don't think the move to featherweight is next for Merab, I'll be honest. Did I think about it? Yes. Billy, what is happening, my friend? Did I think about the move for Merab? 100%. I think it makes sense. But the truth of it is, I don't think he needs to. I really don't think he needs to. I don't think he wants to necessarily do it that much anyway. He's not been someone that's always spoke about it. And secondly, I don't think he's right for that weight class. I met him in China. I met him in Shanghai. Me and Frank spoke to him for quite a while, to be honest, in the gym. Spoke to him for quite a long time. Obviously, I've known his cameraman, Jake, for ages. So when I saw him, obviously there's a mutual connection there. Aljo's fighting on the card. I've met him a couple of times. He's come down to top team, so he knows the coaches pretty well. So we met in Abu Dhabi, sorry. But he's not a featherweight, really and truly. He really isn't. He is a bantamweight. He doesn't diet. He does not diet. He does not cut weight, really. He just cuts weight basically in fight week. That is not typical. You diet throughout fight camp, you bring your calories down, you create a deficit, you bring your weight down to within about 15, 20 pounds to a certain fighter is going to be different. And then you water cut. He doesn't do any of that. He just diets a couple of days on the fight week and then does a run. That is not featherweight behavior. So if anything, Pantoja comes up to him. That's what I think should happen. To answer your question. So I don't think it's a crazy idea because you're kind of thinking, what's next? He's done everything. And I agree with you. But I don't know if that's the move. And I also think if we talk about kryptonite, Alexander Volkanovski is Merab Dvalishvili kryptonite. I believe that. We talk about cardio and gas tank, and I think on sheer numbers and what we've seen, and with the fact that he's gone for 9 million takedowns in a fight, I have to say that Merab's got the best cardio of all time. But with that said, I also believe, with both things being true at the same time, that if he were to fight an Alexander Volkanovski, he's not pacing the boy. That's not happening. That's not happening. I think he could shoot 1 million takedowns like he did against Jose Aldo. He's not pacing the boy. I stand firm on that one. As confident as I am in Merab, he is not putting a pace on Alexander Volkanovski. That is not happening. And as someone who has dapped up both men, I'm telling you, there's a big size difference between the two. Not necessarily in height, just in density. Merab's a dense, strong fella, but he's not that big. He's not that big. Volk, different story. You can feel those days when he was a prop in the shoulders, in the legs. Not quite the case with Merab. They're very, very different strengths. So when Merab starts tying up with Volk, he's realizing, oh, he's not moving. He's not moving. This is a geezer that, yeah, I know he lost to him twice, but we're talking about very competitive in the strength area with Islam Makhachev. Brother, Islam and Merab are in two different stratospheres in regards to strength and size. Just on that alone, not even necessarily on skill sets, but just on strength. And so I don't think he wants to go up to featherweight, to be honest. I think he would be pretty undersized for the very elite. Do I think he could beat a lot of guys there? 100%. Of course I do. And you never know how much someone's going to sort of fill into their body. But like I said, he doesn't cut weight. So yeah, no, actually, no, not at all. Has to be Umar Merab. Yeah, I think so. I think if they don't do the Pantoja matchup, I'd like to see the Pantoja matchup personally. I've been going for about an hour and 40. That's pretty impressive. So let's round out with a couple of questions. And then I probably need to get a sleep because I've actually not slept. What's the time? It's flipping nearly 9 o'clock. Jesus, people are messaging me. I'm thinking, why are people messaging me? It's in the middle of the night, but no, it's 9 a.m. I've not slept. I've got a lot of work to do on this fine Sunday. And I'm not really sure how I roll about this day because I feel pretty wired now after this iced coffee. So I reckon the plan is I finish the stream, I do some editing, I get some work done before I just feel super strained. Then I have a nap about 1-ish, wake up about 3-ish, and then just repeat the system. There's a lot to do. In fact, scrap that. I'm going to film some TikToks right now. I'm going to film about 10, just smash them out. Got a lot to talk about. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Right, I'm going to conclude the stream. It's been an absolute blast. Thank you all for joining on the YouTube. Thank you all for joining on the TikTok. As you can see, around me, I have a plethora of different things. Comics, clothes, t-shirts, all of that good stuff. All on my website if you want any of that. To be honest, there's actually not a lot left, so I don't know what is on there. Sent out a couple of things today. Go on, before you go, get my opinion on one thing. Go for it. Yeah, sent out a few things today, so not a lot left. But speaking of the devil, of Islam March, look at that bad boy. That was when folks stepped in. That was Abu Dhabi, actually. That was going to the Abu Dhabi card. So my favorite one, though. Come on, look at that one. Sick. But yeah, it's been fun. If you would like any equipment, I've now paired with actually a really cool equipment company that have given me a code. So if you want to get a discount, you get 10% off. We're actually working on a really cool collaboration line. Me and Combat Co. Been working on these gloves and shin pads for a good few months actually, and we're just doing a test design. Then we're going to roll out some before I go to Thailand, and I really like these. So if you need any new equipment, my collaboration one hasn't come out yet, but I do have a discount code, which is casuals10. Elbow pads, shin pads, knee pads, gloves, 8 ounces, 16s, anything like that you need. There you go. There you go. Especially since you know it. Will the Hulks be successful in the UFC? It's so strange that you asked me that because you just caught me on this story before I leave. I saw their flipping videographer today at Hitman Fight League, and we was chatting, and he said, "Oh, I just saw your comment on Harry's YouTube." And I said, "Oh, that's weird. I was chatting to him the other day about that, and he was telling me he got one of his friends to do it." I was like, "I guess you're the friend of which I already met." And he was like, "Yeah," and we was just chatting about it because he's done a good job on his YouTube. So, will they be successful in the UFC? I think if the UFC play it right and they give them good matchups and they use them smartly, I think the UFC can really do a lot of good business with the Hardwick brothers, to be honest. I think they're really, really good in front of the media. And of course they can fight and they have to. Do I think they'll have their work cut out, both of them, to perform consistently in the UFC? Yeah, 100% I do. 100% I do. And they know that. That's no secret. But I also think if they do get a few wins here and there, and they do continue being themselves and shining a light on sort of their personality, they will do just fine. Commentary and talking shows and podcast episodes and behind the scenes content and coaching content, they will be just fine. So I think their priority, yes, should be winning fights, but should also just be their media game and really dial into that, to be honest. And Harry's got the idea because he's already outsourced his YouTube to someone very talented. So shout out John O'Ramsey for that. He's already smashed it on the YouTube. Their head screwed on with that, and they're very captivating to the audience, including myself. They're entertaining, so yeah, I think they'll do well. What's happening? What is happening? I'm just about to bounce off the stream. I've done an hour and 40 straight with no sleep on the iced coffees. So you tune in at the wrong time, my friend. I do apologize, but I do appreciate everyone that dialed in for the live stream. It has been fun to catch up. I've been chatting for almost 2 hours, which is kind of insane. I've not broke stride once, not once. Apart from a couple of sneezes, and I'm pretty impressed with that. So before I go, again, I'll just say thank you. I hope you enjoyed the card. I'll be dropping a GBTV this week, just to give you a little info on what I'll be dropping next. I'll be dropping a GBTV. Behind the scenes will be coming out of me going to the Muay Thai show, also us going to UFC Shanghai. I'll be doing a video of us going to UFC Shanghai for Lon's fight, and a GBTV episode with that as well, which is on the way. And then also one from UFC Macau, which is actually sort of partly edited as well. So lots coming out on the YouTube. That's really where you're going to be able to find me over the next couple of months. Sure, I'll be active everywhere else like I always am, but YouTube is really where you're going to find me over the next couple of months. So tune in there. Thank you for all of the engagement, as always, people. I appreciate it. As always, keep it casual. Of course, it aged well, brother.